Welcome to The Crucible, Conversations for the Curious. I am Hamish, your host. This podcast is for anyone going through awakenings, trying to make sense of life, whether dark nights of the soul, needing to make life-changing decisions, struggling with addiction or critical illness, or simply realizing that their life as they know it is not aligned to values and purpose. You are not alone. You can get through this, I promise you. Life is far more beautiful on the other side. Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Crucible, Conversations for the Curious. Today we've got Duncan with us, and Duncan is an author, a speaker, and a Morris dancer. Duncan, thanks so much for turning up today.
Well, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it. You know, I'm thinking it might be exciting to pour myself into the crucible.
It's a good place to be. Can be a bit hot, can be a bit uncomfortable, but it's definitely a good place to be. Right. Let's start with the Morris dancer. Why don't we start there? Tell me about the Morris dancing and why that is important to you.
Well, so initially I just put it on my business cards, kind of almost as a joke, because like all my friends are speakers and they're coaches and they're facilitators and they're MCs and they've got all these grand titles. And I just thought, I'm going to just say speaker, author, Morris dancer, because I thought it was funny. And then it genuinely does spark conversations and it gets people talking. And one of the things that I really like to talk about is how I very much enjoy Morris dancing, even though I've stopped drinking.
Do they go hand in hand then, by any chance?
Yes. I have to assume that not everybody in the entire world knows everything there is to know about Morris dancing, but yes, it generally happens in pubs. If it's not in pubs, then usually they find somewhere else to buy alcohol. And yeah, I mean, honestly, you know, part of the reason why I started was because you get to hang around with a bunch of people who don't look at you twice if you're drinking at 10 a.m. So yeah.
Glad I missed out on that. There was no Morris dancing in South Africa. There definitely wasn't anything like that. Right, so let's dive back. So you for some reason you found yourself Morris dancing at 10 o'clock in the morning with a beer in the other hand. But why the beer? Why did that appear in your life?
Well, I think when I was younger, you know, I sort of struggled to find a place in life where I could excel, where I could get some positive feedback. There was a lot of negativity at school, and I just didn't feel like I fitted in anywhere. And then when it came to going to parties, when you get to that sort of teenage age and everybody starts going to parties, again, I felt nervous. I felt uncomfortable. I didn't feel like I fitted in until one day, one of my friends handed me a can of something and, I opened it up. I didn't think too much of it. Yeah, first one never really did very much, did it? But then all of a sudden, it started to tingle in the toes. It moved up the legs, hit the stomach, chest, brain. And all of a sudden, I seemed to have the confidence. I seemed to be the kind of person that would walk casually into the party and start talking to that pretty girl from Form F. And, a couple of beers later and, the rest is history. In fact, it's so history, I can't even remember the name of the pretty girl from Form F. But for me, it seemed to just fill in all the blanks. It seemed to literally fill in the holes in my personality. What seemed to be missing seemed to be filled in by alcohol. It was like all of my Christmases came at once. So I was absolutely all in from the start.
Yep. It does, doesn't it? When you're young, it just loosens that tongue a little bit, takes away you can suddenly dance rather than like a man, like your father. You can dance like a teenager and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is one of the reasons why it is such a pervasive drug. Yeah, it does a few different things, and therefore it appeals to quite a wide range of people. I mean, often people will say, "Well, what's your sort of like?" What's the personality type of somebody who drinks, which is one step away from just saying, well, you've got an addictive personality, haven't you, Duncan? And it's like, well, yeah, but honestly, you can find people who are very introverted who drink, and you can find people who are very extroverted who drink, and they almost drink for exactly the opposite reasons. And I think that is part of the problem with alcohol, because it has properties that stimulate you and properties that depress you. So it seems to do an awful lot for people, which is why people get caught up in it in the first place. And then, honestly, if you drink enough volume over enough time, then you end up drinking in an unhealthy way, and I certainly did.
So when did you realize it was actually becoming unhealthy? Certainly for me, it was, as you said, it was the fun, the light of the party, the experience, the hanging out with people. But when did it start to be like, hey, Duncan, that kind of thing?
Yeah, do you know what? I almost didn't realize until I stopped. So it was one of those weird things. It's like, should have noticed that a lot sooner, really, shouldn't I? Because like you say, it started off, it was a lot of fun. It was very social. I wasn't actually drinking that much. I wasn't drinking that regularly. But as time went on, the amount of people I drank with went down and the amount I drank went up. And I took it to its logical conclusions, which was just sat on my own drinking a couple of bottles of wine. And, that is genuinely absolutely no fun. And looking back on it now, I can see I don't want to call it the carnage, because that's not necessarily the right word, because on one level I was quite successful. I was leading what might be described as a reasonably good adulty kind of life. And yeah, so it didn't look like carnage in the traditional sense, but I look back on, what it did to my relationships, what it did to my mindset, my outlook, my mental health. And that's the kind of carnage that I'm talking about. And I didn't really see it at the time. I just had this vague kind of feeling that probably something needed to be done. And it reached a head when my wife and I, as we were very, very good adults, we thought we ought to do the most adult thing possible, which is, of course, start a family. And that was quite good fun. Well, I mean, the trying bit was quite good fun. And then my wife got pregnant and we were instantly transformed into that really, really stupid couple. They're just the naive, wandering around, smiling all the time, just no idea what they've let themselves in for. And it was all amazing until very quickly it wasn't amazing, and my wife had a miscarriage and it all went horribly wrong. And of course, that was incredibly hard on her, physically, emotionally, mentally. It took a huge toll. But I look back now and I think, I know what made it worse. That was the fact that I wasn't there for her. My default reaction to stress was just to pour myself into a bottle of wine. And I wasn't there for her. And that obviously kind of expressed itself in our relationship, and it got very rocky for a couple of months. And during that time, I spent a lot of time sort of thinking, asking myself, what is the point of Duncan? Genuinely, Duncan, what are you here for? What are you supposed to be doing? And I never had one of those like beautiful moodily lit moments at 4 a.m. in the bathroom with the music and everything. But if I had, I know the question that I would have asked myself. I'd have looked in the mirror with my serious, chiseled, good look face and said, what do you want from life, Duncan? Do you want another drink, or do you want to start a family? And the good news is I took the right decision, and almost 9 months of the day after I stopped drinking, our daughter was born. And that was wonderful for about 10 minutes. And then I was in a whole other world of problems. But, those are good problems, aren't they?
Oh, that is lovely. I mean, congratulations, first of all, for having your come to Jesus moment, not in the bathroom at 4 a.m. But that's it, isn't it? It always comes to a point where you have two choices. We always have more than one choice. Fortunately, like me, you chose the right choice, and relationship's still going. Obviously, there's kids involved and stuff. So that is fabulous. But why? What did you have to deal with when you stopped the drinking? What was the drinking doing to you, for you, and against you, I suppose?
So what it was doing to me was obviously having quite a bad effect. So when I stopped, I felt better, and I felt better very quickly. When I stopped pouring poison down my throat, all of a sudden my mood improved, and I felt more energetic. I was better, I could focus a bit better, I could concentrate a bit harder, all of those kind of stuff. So initially it was quite good, But then, of course, you kind of have to relearn life, don't you? You sort of got to find a way of dealing with stress, because up until that point, so much as a broken fingernail would be a good excuse to open a bottle of wine, wouldn't it? So I had to find a new way to deal with stress. I had to find a new way to navigate my relationship. And I had to do that fairly quickly because it was not in the greatest place. So I had to find a new way of relating to my wife. I went on and found a new job reasonably soon after I stopped drinking, because I realized the only reason why I'd kept that job for so long was, well, all right, it was quite close to Greg's, but it was something I could do with a hangover. And that was, that was very necessary at the time. So I had to tackle certain sort of procedural issues within my life, like jobs and washing up and all of the DIY that I've been putting off for, well, most of my life. It kind of brought a big, long shopping list of difficult stuff to do. But looking back on it, I am very, very happy to have, got into that list and started doing those difficult things. On balance, it turns out to be a lot better to face the difficult stuff than it is to run away from it, because you never actually get further away from it. You just do the running bit. You don't run away from it. You just run around it and around it and around it and around it and around it. And that gets tiring. So it was, in one sense, it was amazing. It improved my life for the better, but it gave me a load of other problems. But, 9.5 years down the line, having sorted out many of those problems, although there is still a little bit of DIY I haven't got around to, but no one's perfect. I am so glad that I managed to get myself in a position that I could deal with those issues, because I love my wife and I love my daughter, and they wouldn't be in my life if I hadn't have changed.
I think that is the key thing, isn't it? You've woken up and you've taken responsibility, and it means you've got to adult, which is overrated, but it's better than just, as you said, standing still and running. That image horrifies me, because I remember doing that, and it is, isn't it? It's not easy. You're worrying, you're guessing, you're drinking, you're wondering where to get the next drink from. You're just wasting so much energy on nonsense.
Yeah, one of the succession of dead-end jobs that I had so that I could support my drinking without actually really working for a living involved working in a bookmaker's, which I used to refer to myself as a turf accountant, of course. But and the thing is, when I worked in that bookmaker's, I did watch a lot of dog racing. And it is exactly the same thing. It's like, bang, out go the dogs. They run around the track. They don't get anywhere. And the thing is, they never even catch the hare, do they? And the thing, on top of that, the hare isn't even real. Now, there's an allegory for drinking that I haven't quite worked out yet. But yes, you're running round and round and round, chasing something you never catch. And even if you did, it wasn't real in the first place.
Oh, we must have been stupid, hey? We must have been. But, and as you said, it worked for a while. It helped us make sense of stuff and helped us feel sexy and likable and this, that, and the other. But it doesn't solve anything. You still got to do that work and make sense of it. And then you empower yourself and life becomes fun. Yeah.
I'm not even sure it really worked for a while, to be honest. I think it prevented me from actually doing the stuff that would have made my life work. I still had to do it. I just, rather than like becoming self-aware at 16, I decided to become self-aware at 36. So it just delayed the inevitable, didn't it? It made everything harder, I think. It seemed like it was doing positive things, but that is the very nature of a maladaptive coping mechanism, isn't it? It makes you think it's working, but actually it's not. It's not helping you. It's not benefiting you. And I'd love to be able to sort of fondly reminisce and say, well, I had some amazing times due to alcohol. I absolutely did not. I had some amazing times due to the people that I spent it with that was hampered by alcohol, because if I hadn't have been drinking so much, I might have remembered a bit more of it.
Yeah. Again, another tragedy, isn't it? Yeah. I think it's interesting about the jobs. We often find that another reason we're drinking is the job is not particularly fulfilling. I mean, certainly, as you said, watching dogs run around in circles, that's probably not the most stimulating fun you can have in a job. Did that impact your willingness to sober up? Just the fact that the job's what you were doing?
Yes and no. I mean, one of the things that I've come across a lot speaking to other people who've gone on a similar journey to me is that for them, meaning and purpose is enormously important. And I think I was kind of unlucky in as far as I was very involved in my local community. So not just the Morris dancing, I was involved in local government. I was involved in a number of I was a trustee on a number of charities. I was very much involved in my local community. So on one level, I was fulfilling that kind of purpose and meaning sort of piece. So it sort of seemed like I was doing that. But actually, a few years down the line, what I realized was I was kind of living the expectations of other people. I wasn't really doing what I wanted to do, what me as a true and fully realized human being. I wasn't following my purpose. I wasn't doing my sort of stuff. So it kind of tricked me a little bit by having, ready access to things like meaning and purpose. It sort of kept me in the rut a little bit longer. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I, not had that, I think I probably would have realized I was in trouble a lot quicker. Mm-hmm. And do you know what? I don't think that that's true of many people. I know that that's true of many people. So if you look at the statistics, so people who earn more drink more. That's, a direct correlation. You can draw a very straight line upward graph on that, income versus the amount you drink. So the more you earn, the more you drink. However, many of the health problems and social problems manifest themselves most seriously in people who are in the poorer end of things. They don't actually drink as much as the people who are rich, but they have more problems because they have less what might be termed as recovery capital, but they just have less stuff that mitigates against that. So their diet's not going to be as good. Their access to healthcare is not going to be as good. They're going to have less things like meaning and purpose. They're going to have less social support. They're going to have less, family support. So all of those other factors that people who are affluent have, they offset the harm done by alcohol. So we don't notice the harm as much. We think, oh, well, it's all right because, I'm doing okay. I'm coping. Yeah. But that is only because you have all of these massive positives here. If you actually took away the big negative, then you really would see what, thriving rather than surviving looks like.
Yeah. Very scary, isn't it? The more I think about things like that, the more support you have, the easier it is to be supported while you fall. People, situations, money. Yeah. Go to rehab, come back again, carry on. That's really scary though, isn't it? I mean, that's coming back to I can start that again. But coming back to value and purpose, that plays such a huge part. And in many conversations I've had, that seems to be one of the most powerful things. When you've found your purpose, you found what's important to you, that need for self-medicating, whatever you want to call it, sort of disappears.
Yes, I think that is true. However, my experience is that I couldn't really find it until I'd stopped self-medicating. And I know that is always a bit of a debate, and I can see it from both sides, because I know people who have done an awful lot of work with therapists and, found a much more fulfilled version of themselves, and then discovered that they don't really need to drink. So they did the work and then the alcohol fell away. So it is possible to do it that way round. Having said that, I have found many more people who have stopped drinking and then gone on to do the things like, engage with therapy in the broadest sense of the word, and go on to find the things like meaning and purpose, and go on and create some amazing things, whether that's art or literature or businesses or music or adventures or just families, I think certainly for my money, if you'd asked me when I was drinking, I would have told you what my purpose in life was. I would have told you, I would have outlined it nicely and neatly, because I talk a good game. And I was doing stuff that I still, I stand by it. I still consider what I did when I was drinking. I consider a lot of it to be meaningful and important, but it wasn't really what I was put on this earth to do. So yeah, it is a tough one, but I personally, I think it is much easier to do the work after you've stopped drinking, rather than find the purpose and then use that as a springboard to stop drinking.
Okay. Yep. That does make a lot of sense, doesn't it? Does that not make it harder to stop drinking?
No, I don't think it's hard to stop drinking. I mean, I know that is pretty flip and pretty quick, and I genuinely don't want to do down any of the struggles that anybody has had, because I know a lot of people do struggle. I think, unfortunately, many people go about it in the wrong way, which makes it harder rather than easier to stop drinking. But even putting all of that aside, actually getting to the point where, you've gone through detox, you've gone through those initial withdrawal stages, and you are what might be termed sober, that is relatively straightforward. Most people actually achieve that. They go to rehab and, they get sober. The problem most people have is not that bit, it's staying sober. That's the hard bit.
Yeah.
And that's the real shame, that we talk very heavily about that kind of bit where you stop drinking, the immediate bit, the first few weeks. We don't talk an awful lot about those next 2 or 3 years, which are, enormously important. And, so yes, I genuinely think it is easy for anybody to stop drinking. I've certainly never met anybody who drinks heavily who really enjoys it. And if you don't enjoy doing something, all you need is, a little bit of help and support. You need your hand held. You need a little bit of information. You need to, in my opinion, you need to get to grips with your beliefs, because you believe that you're getting something out of alcohol. And again, the research supports that. Your beliefs about alcohol are very heavily correlated to the amount you drink. So you need to get to grips with your beliefs. You need a little bit in terms of craving management. You need other skills like emotional intelligence and finding a new way to relax, finding a new way to be with people. You might, need to change your situation around other people. If like literally, if you spend all your time hanging around in bars, you probably do need to change the way you've structured your life. But in essence, that getting sober bit is really, really easy. We do absolutely, I believe we need to offer people much more support in those kind of 3 months to 3 years where it goes wrong for so many people.
Yep. I agree, and it's not a perverse thing to say the getting sober is the easy bit, because it is tough, but it's just the first step, isn't it? It's like buying a house. You just buy a house, then you've got to pay for it, the upkeep, the support, living in it, everything else. Yeah, so I guess that leads on to relapse, doesn't it? Because that's kind of the next stage. One has sobered up. One has sobered up. One has got all that determination, got that grit, and then something happens. How do you, because you've got to change that structure underneath, haven't you, to not just bounce back as soon as something goes wrong to those old habits. How would you start changing your structure, your underlying structure, so you become more resistant to relapse and more resilient?
Well, I mean, partly I'm tempted to just say, I think we kind of need to redefine relapse, because I think there are 3 different things. If you look classically what a relapse would be, that is when you start drinking and you continue to drink. Then some people would define a lapse as just having a drink, but not then going back to drinking the way you were.
Yep.
And then I would say there is another thing which you might call new facts, because it sort of rhymes with relapse, doesn't it? And though that would be when you have a drink, and you actually learn something from it, because that's not a bad thing. That's actually a really good thing. You made a mistake, maybe, but you learned something from it. Well, congratulations. Welcome to the human race, my friend. That is exactly how we learn stuff. So I think starting off, we need to do that. I mean, in the broader sense, we've identified sort of four main areas that people focus on. So from the research that we've done around asking people what they're struggling with in early sobriety and interviewing the sober superstars who are making a big success of sobriety, the things that we found are, you could call it recovery capital. That's your kind of physical, your nuts and bolts, your job, your house, money, car, just the access to healthcare, and also a little bit of your physical health. Do you have any illnesses? I gave myself gout drinking. So those kind of things we'd bracket into recovery capital, which is often the stuff people take for granted. Everybody says, oh yeah, well, I found it really easy to get sober. Well, of course I did. I had a house and I had a job and I had money and I had access to healthcare and I had so much going for me.
Yeah.
Then you can look at trigger management, which in the short term, well, a month, maybe 2 or 3 months is what you really need to focus on trigger management. In my humble, some methods are very focused on that. So if you use cognitive realignment, then it will be totally and utterly focused on trigger management. But if you use a lot of other methods, they're focused much more on willpower. And willpower is not a very good trigger management strategy. There are many better out there. So that's an enormously important piece of work. And then once you've got your recovery capital and your trigger management under control, then you need to start thinking about two things. One is emotional intelligence. They say that you don't grow when you're drinking, which I use as an excuse to claim I'm still in my 20s. Well, I started drinking when I was about 14, and I've only been sober 9.5 years. So that makes me 24.5, doesn't it?
Congratulations.
Anyway,
I love that.
I think they probably mean emotionally. So yeah, I mean that, like, genuinely, most people believe that alcohol numbs your emotions, and that's part of the reason why they drink it. I don't think it does. I think it sort of pushes them around a little bit and ends up making you uncomfortable in different places. But learning to engage with your own emotions and how that relates to other people's emotions, which you might call emotional intelligence, is a massive piece. And then finally, connection. Everybody knows that famous phrase from Johann Hari, the opposite of addiction is connection. And that's something that's massively borne out in our research. Connection to other people, first and foremost. Yes, that's absolutely massive. Finding, meaningful connection, whether that's, relationships of an intimate nature or just friendships or just socializing or even just networking, finding a way through the work environment, the sort of connection part of that work environment. That is such a huge thing. So those are the four things that I help people work on, and the things that we really tend to talk about a lot. Recovery capital, trigger management, emotional intelligence, and connection.
It's a really nice collection of tools and resources. I'd not met them in that context, but it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Well, I'm glad you've not met them in that context, because I thought I'd made it up.
Oh, then, well, then you've made it up and it's working. So that's brilliant. No, that's really interesting, isn't it? But I can honestly relate to that. If you've got that support, everything is easier. If you haven't, but that's the problem, isn't it? When you slip through the gaps and you don't have the support, you don't have the house, you don't have the money, you don't have that emotional support you need, that's when it's dangerous, isn't it? That's when there is problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen it. I've seen people who I kind of like, I look at them and I think, you know what? I really wish we were doing this 2 years ago, because 2 years ago you had a stable job, you had, enough money to take care of your bills. You were still living with your partner. I know he's an idiot, but you were still living with him. And, you still had regular contact with your children. And I know they're annoying, but, there's something in that. And, you had a house to live in. And all of those kind of things would make what we were doing so much easier. And that's one of the reasons why these days I want to talk more to people who aren't drinking heavily. I want to talk to the people who are drinking, well, moderately. Love the word moderation. What does that actually mean? But the people who are drinking in that kind of medium to severe risk zone, they haven't got, they might not be drinking every day. They might not even really be drinking that heavily, but they're on that road. They are going down that path. And either it's just a matter of time or it's a matter of something happening. That's one of the things that we see all of the time, those kind of adult traumas taking people from drinking at that kind of mid to severe risk range. You get a divorce, losing your job, losing your business, crashing your car, any of those kind of things, and it just pushes you over the edge. And that's what spirals you down into that kind of like very severe, very heavy drinking, real problem drinking area, what most people would consider to be problem drinking. I think if we can talk to those people in that mid to severe range and help them rebalance their relationship with alcohol, get back into the low risk drinking area, or maybe, I don't know, here's a crazy idea, maybe you could just stop drinking. But that is a decision for them, not a decision for me. But helping them to rebalance their relationship, I think, that is the way to stop people getting to that point where it just becomes so much harder because they've lost all of the support. And it's not, honestly, you don't even have to be altruistic about it. If you don't care about people, just care about the money, because those people that have gone all the way around the other side, they are an incredible drain on society. They are the ones that make up the bulk of the money that gets spent on policing, on social care, and on healthcare around alcohol. And they all started out as moderate drinkers, and there we go. That's another point. Do you want me to rant about the alcohol industry and money and how much it costs the economy? Because that, I think, is where I'm going.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, isn't it? If somebody brought a new street drug out, let's call it alcohol. You can buy it in a can. It just wouldn't be. Yeah.
Do you want to know the really funny thing? If you bought out a food supplement, like a food additive, like if alcohol was an E number. Right? If alcohol, you wanted to put it in food now, you'd have to put it through the European Union food standard tests. I know we have left the august European Union, but I believe we still live by those standards. Anywho's, some scientists actually put it through that just for a laugh, and they discovered that the maximum safe dose of alcohol is 2 units. And when I explain to people that, they go, oh yeah, well, 2 units a day, that's basically what the government tells you to drink, isn't it? It's like, no, it's not 2 units a day, 2 units a week. It's not 2 units a week, 2 units a month. No, 2 units a year. That is the amount of alcohol you could put into food. And the European Union would consider it to be safe. So what's that work out as? If you want to stick it in your trifle, you're putting like a couple of drops of alcohol in your tiramisu.
That is scary, isn't it? So you'd end up just buying bananas, overripe bananas, and eating them.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that's the old discussion about, no, you can't drink 0.5% alcohol because you're sober, and if you do, you won't remain sober. It's like, well, you've got to check out your fruit bowl, my friend, because
yeah. No, I'm going to say, I think we'll try and keep away from the food and the government and the tax on it, and is it which way is that going? Because it's a minefield, and I don't know what the answer is.
I do. I mean, I'm like very happy to tell you. And the thing is, there is so much research on what the answer is, which is incredibly well understood in alcohol policy research circles, but largely ignored by most governments. So increased tax, that will, make a huge difference. And people go, oh, but alcohol's really expensive. It's genuinely not. Over the last 10 years in the UK, alcohol has not had a tax increase for 9 of them. So into everything else has gone up apart from alcohol. So alcohol duty is also taxed in a very weird way. So there is a levy on a barrel of beer, and that levy on the barrel of beer doesn't really change very much, even if the government do put it up. But of course, as everything else gets more expensive, that bit of tax as a percentage of the price goes down and down and down. So actually the percentage tax keeps going down, which is why over the last 30 years, alcohol has become like 87% cheaper in terms of the cost of living. So it's just ridiculous. So yes, increased tax, reduce availability. It is ridiculous that you can, get Uber Eats to deliver you some wine at 4 a.m. That's immoral, in my opinion. That is feeding people with problems. So massively reduce availability. The countries that have off-license monopolies like Scandinavia, they have far less problems because you can't buy beer after 6 o'clock. So of course they have a lot less problems. Increase education in schools, that would make a big difference, wouldn't it? There's no real evidence that suggests that putting health warnings on alcohol actually reduces the amount that people drink. There's no evidence that it reduces the amount that people smoke, but there is some interesting evidence about how it reduces it influences the way people think about the product. So at the moment, you go into the supermarket and you buy a bottle of beer and you think, bottle of beer, cabbage, some pasta, tins of beans, you just think of it as a normal kind of piece of your shopping. And 20 years ago, that was the way people thought about cigarettes. They thought, I'll go into the shops, I'll get a few groceries and a packet of cigarettes. And they thought about them all in the same way. But now, because of the way cigarettes are packaged, people think of them as something very different because they are. Much as I dislike crisps and Haribo and junk food in general, cigarettes and alcohol are very different from them. So they should be sold in a very different way. And I think that would help to change the way people perceive them. And it certainly has changed the way young people perceive smoking, which probably leads me into ranting about vaping, but that's an entirely different podcast, isn't it?
That is really, really interesting. I mean, the whole thing about the small amount of tax on your alcohol, people still buy it. They really do, don't they? So this research, obviously, this is a thing that it fascinates you. This is part of your, I guess it's part of your writing and your speaking, is just bringing the awareness to the darker sides of it, if you want to call it. Tell me a bit about that and why it's so important to you.
So I'm not saying that if somebody had pointed out to me that alcohol causes cancer, or that as a white British man, if I start drinking, I have around a 30% chance of developing a problem with drinking. I'm not saying if somebody had told me that before I started drinking, I wouldn't have got a problem. But I would have thought about it differently. Even just a little bit, I would have thought about it differently. Because when I started smoking, I knew that smoking was bad for me. And therefore, I never really thought I was going to smoke for the whole of my life. I thought at some point, and usually sooner rather than later, I was going to stop smoking. However, nobody told me that alcohol was bad for me. Nobody told me that there was a high likelihood of me developing a problem with it. So I never thought that I would ever stop drinking. I just thought, that's it. I'm going to drink for life. I thought it was great. I thought it was perfectly safe. I thought it was completely normal. I didn't think that way about smoking. And that's one of the things that I really would like people to know and understand, and to start, the conversation, and to start talking about alcohol in a different way. Because we do talk about alcohol. We talk about it all the time. I mean, all you have to do is go into a birthday card shop. You will see all of those cards, which basically says, what they amount to saying is, I hope you get drunk and fall over for your birthday, which is actually quite a weird thing to wish somebody as a birthday wish, isn't it? But, that's the way we talk about alcohol. Oh, yeah, of course you can have a gin and tonic on Tuesday at 3:30. Nothing wrong with that. It's wine o'clock. Yeah, I deserve this bottle of wine. All of that kind of stuff we talk about all of the time, but we don't actually talk about the real problem that is alcohol. We just kind of ignore it and sweep it under the carpet. And that's all I want to do. I want to start the conversation. I want to get people thinking about it. I want people to understand what low risk drinking actually is. And I am not an advocate for alcohol. I don't think anybody should drink alcohol, but people want to drink alcohol. That's fine. If you're going to drink alcohol, I would love you to understand what low risk drinking looks like. And I would love you to understand that actually, if you drink in a low risk way, it's far more enjoyable.
Yeah, it is. I think that conversation would be so powerful, wouldn't it? Right down at kid level, at school level, just about that time that we're finding that it's making us feel sexy and stronger about ourselves. All that wisdom just goes out the way because I feel good. So it's complete re-education, isn't it? It can't be anything more simple than that.
Yeah. And look, I mean, number one, thank you very much for letting me have this conversation on your podcast. That's like, you are clearly part of the solution and not part of the problem. So great. And on that note, everybody who's listening, go and give him 5 stars on Apple to help him get the message out there, because he's clearly doing the good work, isn't he? But yeah, absolutely. We need to change the conversation that happens in schools. Help young people to understand. But ultimately, my daughter is always asking me for a unicorn, right? And I can't give her a unicorn because I don't have a unicorn. And that is one of the central problems with being a parent. You cannot give your children something that you do not have. So if you do not have a good relationship with alcohol, then it is very hard for you to give your children a good relationship with alcohol. So yes, we absolutely need to do more education. But what the evidence shows is that education just for young people is not enormously effective. Actually, it's much more effective if it's holistic and it's at more of a community level and it engages both parents and children. So yes, I do work in schools. I'm, always happy to come and share my bad jokes, obscure 90s references that they all just like look at you funny when you start talking about pulp. They're like, common people, how can you not know that song? It's great. I mean, seriously, anyway. But mostly, all of my knowledge and expertise and take on alcohol, I'm always happy to share that with young people. But I think, it's something that we've all got to do together.
The bit that gave me chills is if you don't have a good relationship with alcohol, you're not going to be able to pass that good relationship on to children. You'd have thought that was page 1. But again, I guess the parents aren't aware of that. I suppose it's a bit like these oil companies pillaging from their children. And what are their grandchildren going to have left? They don't care. So how somebody in their 20s, 30s, who's about to have kids and doesn't have a very healthy attitude with alcohol, how would you encourage them to change their mindset before they have the children and need a drink because of the children?
I mean, honestly, it's just a matter of talking it through. I've had many conversations with many people, and starting a family or raising a family is often a huge motivator, and that is one of the reasons why the sort of peak time to stop drinking and indeed to stop taking drugs is sort of about 30, between about 30 and 40. I mean, it's not like if you're older than that, it's not like give up, but that is one of the peak times, and it's often around either you're going to have kids and you've got this vague nagging doubt that, hold on a minute, how am I going to do midnight bottles if I'm drunk? It's just like, how is that going to work out? So that is a big motivator, but also I can give you so many stories around children and how that's motivated parents to stop. One guy, he said, it was the point when I realized I was actually scaring my children. When I did that, I had to stop. Another guy said to me, I decided to come and see Duncan because my son said to me, Daddy, when I grow up, do I have to drink? And it was just like, that's like a spear through the heart, isn't it? Or these days they just phone you, they video you, don't they? They video you on your phone, on their phone, and then they show you what an idiot you are when you were drunk, and you just go, yeah, maybe it's time to knock it on the head.
Yeah, and I guess that leads us on to shame, doesn't it? Because that is a big problem with alcohol as well, isn't it? We hide because of that. And I guess if, Johnny turns up with, hey, Daddy, this is what you looked last night, there's a lot of shame there. I mean, it's a powerful motivator to stop, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it is one of those things that I expect it's going to go one of two ways. Shame is not necessarily a good tool, but
No.
if you can go beyond the shame and actually have that realization and see yourself as other people see you, I think
Mm.
that's enormously powerful. I
Mm.
think one of the mistakes that successive governments have made with health campaigns is they have actually tried to shame people into changing, and it doesn't really work. I mean, they did it with smoking for years and years and years. Smoking is killing you. In fact, they still written on the packet in big letters, smoking kills you, right? If somebody tells you that you're going to die, what does that make you feel? You feel afraid, doesn't it?
Mm.
Yeah. What do most smokers do when they're afraid?
Yep.
They
Fuck up.
smoke,
Mm.
which is why the tobacco industry actually loves those health warnings, because they just scare smokers into smoking more. It's yeah. So I think, if I got to write the things on the packets, I would write, "You are enough. You are a complete human being, and you do not need these cigarettes. Quitting is easy, and you will feel a lot better. And I don't mean in 20 years' time. I mean like tomorrow. You
Mm.
will wake up tomorrow feeling so much better."
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. Tell me about your writing, because you've talked about the speaking and obviously that's what you do, but tell me about the books that you've written as well, because that's another message another way you get your message across.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a writer. I've always loved writing. It's always been really, really important to me. Uh, when I was drinking, I wrote an awful lot, and all of that is still in some dusty drawer in some dusty desk in some long forgotten warehouse somewhere. I never ever did anything with my writing until I stopped drinking, and since I've stopped drinking, I've published 3 books. So the most recent of them is called Real Men Quit. That is because what I've noticed is that there are a lot of amazing women doing a lot of amazing work around sobriety and stopping drinking and all of that sort of stuff. And I think they're fantastic. I love them. Their work really, really resonates with me. Unfortunately, it resonates with me now. It wouldn't so much have resonated with me when I was drinking. If your stories revolve around, Chardonnay and the school run, it wasn't really going to kind of like vibe with me as such. So what I wanted to do was write something that was specifically aimed at men, because actually we do outperform women quite significantly when it comes to drinking. The World Health Organization found that around 75% of the alcohol consumed worldwide was consumed by men. So man and a woman go into a bar, you've got to drink 3 of them as a guy, the girl's only got to drink 1. So unsurprisingly, men end up with 2 to 3 times more rates of alcohol issues than women do. But of course, we're not talking about it. It's the women that are talking about it. So as my attempt to be part of the solution, I wrote a book called Real Men Quit, which is, it's for men. So it's got a lot of sports references in it. It's got a lot of James Bond. It's got a lot of Star Wars. It's got a lot of really bad jokes, some of which are slightly rude. It's a book for men about alcohol and maybe rethinking what you're doing with it.
Brilliant. Yep, I will have to look at that. I mean, I think it's really important, is it? Because and men aren't the first people to talk about any problems and things like that. So
Well,
yeah,
the first. I think I'm sure. Sometimes I don't think we're even the last.
we've just forgotten. Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's part of the problem with alcohol is it makes everything very much on a surface level. We'll talk about football because we can safely express our emotions and get angry and all of that sort of stuff, but we won't talk about anything really deep and meaningful and serious. And I'm sorry to the football fans out there. It isn't actually a matter of life and death, and it's not more important than that either. We don't talk very often about, being parents or being husbands or, how we feel, like our mental health. We just don't talk about all of that sort of stuff. And I think one of the reasons is because we don't listen. We just want to have a beer and watch the football. We don't actually want to put in the time to listen to each other. So that's another thing I'd change about the world. Guys, you've got to listen to each other. You've got to ask the questions, shut up and let them answer it, rather than just like, how are you? I'm fine. You've got to dig a bit deeper.
Yep. Sad but true. Yeah. I mean, it took me to, I know I've got a problem, and a moment of clarity before I actually said, hey, I think I'm struggling. Because again, it goes back to that shame, doesn't it? You know, it's a man, I should provide, I should do this, I should do that, and I'm actually dying here because of alcohol and everything else, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's almost like we've been told from the moment that we were born that boys don't cry. You've just got to suck it up. You've got to man up. You just got to push through your problems. Stop complaining. Stop whinging. Stop being a big girl's blouse and just get on with it.
Yep.
Almost like we've been told that our whole lives, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So many narratives to change. So many stories to change. Yeah, Duncan, this has been fabulous. I've enjoyed this. We will do this again. I was about to say we should do this with a glass of no alcohol beer somewhere.
Yes, we definitely should, and we will definitely do this again, both online and offline, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Where can people find out about you, about what you do, why you do it, listen to your slightly dirty jokes, and find out about your books and things? Because I think you've got.
So, if you want to find a copy of Real Men Quit, just fire up Amazon and put Real Men and Quit into it. I mean, it's so simple; even men can do it. And you know, I wrote it for guys. So if you're a guy and you think you might have a bit of an issue with drinking, then go and grab a copy. You know, what's the worst that can happen? You might read a few jokes. But likewise, if you happen to know a man who drinks a bit too much, like we all do, then go and grab them a copy. Make a kind of interesting Christmas present, but you know, you'll see. Anyway, so that's Real Men Quit. If you'd like to read my second book, Get Over Indulgence, you know, I'd love to offer your listeners a copy. If they just put getover.uk into their search engine of choice, that's getover.uk. That'll take you to a bit of my website where you can download a PDF or a Kindle version, and you can have a look at that. That one's shorter, and the jokes are all incredibly family friendly. I'm not saying they're any good, but they are at least family friendly. So that's getover.uk, which will take you to a bit of my website where you can have a look around. You can see more about all of the stuff that we do. We're pretty busy on the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And honestly, if you've got a question, I hope it comes across, but I do like talking about this sort of stuff. So if you've got a question, please get in touch. Please ask me. If I can't help you, I guarantee you I will know someone who can.
Brilliant. Well, we'll make sure all of that information is in the show notes for people.
Thank you.
And I guess most importantly, what is your superpower? What have you realized about life that becoming sober has allowed you to understand?
I think one of the things that I realized when I was writing recently was that it has taken me a lot of time and a lot of effort to get back to where I was when I was first in school. I wrote in a particular style when I first wrote in school, and they didn't like it. It did not go down well with the teachers. To be fair to them, what I have realized is that you actually need to really understand the mechanics of grammar and punctuation and sentence construction before you can write in that style. It sounds very easy and jovial, but it is actually quite complicated to get there. And I think that is a roundabout way of saying, I think what I do really well is make difficult, hard stuff sound casual and easier and maybe a little bit more accessible, because you know you can joke about it, you can have a bit of a laugh with it, and that I think that comes across as sounding really, really easy, but honestly it's a superpower. It's quite hard work. It's taken me a lot of time and effort to get to the point where I can be casual.
Brilliant. I love that. It's getting, makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Finding who you were before it all got tainted, before things like that, and just getting back to being creative, getting back to being peaceful and having fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of my 20s sort of worrying about my artistic voice and trying to find my artistic voice. And what I realized was if you just stop doing personality surveys and actually write something, then you'll find it.
Brilliant. Well, Duncan, thank you ever so much for today. This has been entertaining and really full of information, all sorts of things. So I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. I have loved it, and I feel tempered now. I've come out the other side of the crucible.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Crucible, Conversations for the Curious. If these powerful stories of transformation resonated with you, be sure to like, subscribe and share this show with anyone who you think could do with a dose of inspiration for their own journey. I would really appreciate it if you could make any comments on your favourite podcast platform as well. That helps me reach more people. All the important links and information are in the show notes below. Thank you very much for listening, and catch up with you soon.